Okay, I just added everyone in from the waiting room. And we're at 1:31, so we can probably get started now.
Perfect. Thank you, Mindy. You are the coordinator of the community of practice for MULDINET, so appreciate. Let's start then. Good afternoon. My name is Eduardo Ortiz, and I work for the Institute for Disability Research Policy and Practice in the Research and Training Division at Utah State University. And I would like to welcome all of you to another community of practice organized by Multicultural Disability Network and Training, MULDINET. This project seeks community integration and inclusion of people with disabilities from multicultural background. The intersectionality of disability and diversity includes many factors, such as race, ethnicity, age, rural frontier geographies, gender, and gender identification, among other cultural elements that creates a complex context that needs expanded conversations and learning opportunities, such as this community of practice activity that we are having today. As part of MULDINET work, we have developed at the IDRPP other products. I invite you to look at the link placed in the chat. Mindy is gonna put it there, so thank you. Today, we have the privilege to have Melissa Malcolm King, who will present about From Within the Margin, 6 core ideas of intersectionality relative to race, sexuality, gender, identity, and disabilities. Melissa runs a nonprofit entitled Project Be Safe, bridging the education of safety awareness and female empowerment, having the mission to provide refugee and resources for women and gender minorities surviving domestic violence or other harmful life circumstances. Melissa Malcolm is a proud family member and advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, and is on various planning and leadership boards throughout the continental United States, including having served as the director of the People of Global Majority, the acting president of Asexual Utah, and executive secretary for the LGBTQ IA Love is Love organization. In 2022, Melissa Malcolm began her new adventure with Affirmation as an international board member and liaison to the People of the Global Majority Group. In 2023, Melissa Malcolm became the first woman and person of color elected president of the organization. She holds a bachelor's degree in special education and elementary education, a master's degree in English language learning and curriculum development, and is now earning her doctorate degree from the University of Colorado in Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, focusing her research to benefit the school administrations and nonprofit organizations. I would like to remind some ground rules for this community of practice. First, I would like you to invite the audience to introduce briefly in the chat so we could know a little bit about you, including your name, your organization that you represent, and your role. Also, we would like you to keep your mic mute during the presentation. Remember, this community of practice group is here to discuss, not to debate or argue. Also, any discussion should be focused and avoid side-deviated conversations. Keep an open mind and be open to learning something new. Be respectful of others. Listening is as important as talking, and avoiding making assumptions. Please ask questions politely to gain understanding and clarity. With no more words, Melissa, welcome, and please take the stage.
Thank you, Eduardo, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Melissa Malcolm King. My pronouns are she, they. As you enter the space today, I would like to not only empower the words that Eduardo shared with us today, but as you walk along this journey or come along this journey with us, it is my hope that as we have these difficult conversations, that you may take a piece of this with you and further empower humanity. So without further ado, I'm going to begin my presentation. So today we are going to cover 4 topics. The first one is, what is intersectionality? The second one is the opportunity to look at other people's experiences through an intersectional lens. Topic 3 is how we can create change within ourselves and society. And topic 4 is how we can stop and close the gap. So first off, what is intersectionality? So as I'm speaking, if you have an idea of what intersectionality is, you can go ahead and share that in the chat. Intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and oppression, and we must consider everything and anything that can marginalize people, whether it's gender, class, sexual orientation, physical ability, or mental health. Oh, sorry, I went too far. Okay. So often when we think of intersectionality, people refer to this wheel of power and privilege. Now, as you can see on these wheels, there are many levels by which someone is either marginalized or they have opportunity to obtain power and privilege for themselves. To illustrate this, I would like to play a little game. So if you're able to raise 10 fingers, and I will explain to you what we're going to do. So I would like you to put a finger down for each experience that you have directly experienced or someone in your family has experienced. Okay? So put a finger down if you have been followed in a store and accused of stealing. Put a finger down if you have been asked to change your hairstyle from its natural state. Put a finger down if you have been asked to just speak English. Put a finger down if you have been denied access to an event because of your accessibility aid. Put a finger down if you haven't asked, what are you? Before even being asked your name. Put a finger down if you have been called a racial slur based on your racial, gender, or sexual identity. Put a finger down if you were asked why you don't eat American food. Put a finger down if you had someone struggle to say your name. Put a finger down if you had to code switch to find acceptance. Put a finger down if you were told you were too fat or too thin for certain activities. Take a moment to look at the fingers that you have put down or the fingers that you have put up. That outlines what your power and privilege is. And I hope that you will reflect upon the fact that each of us has a different experience and connection to the world around us. So there are 8 principles of intersectionality that we're going to review right now. And it's important to understand these concepts because these help us to understand how we can uplift the marginalized and support those communities around us who don't always have an equitable voice. So the first word is reflexivity. And basically that means looking at yourself in the mirror, that you're reflecting on your own unconscious bias, beliefs, judgments, and reflective practices, including while at work, at home, at school, and in other social communities. How you, yourself, can make the changes necessary internally to affect the world externally. The next one is dignity, choice, and autonomy. So that means that we want to respect and uphold dignity, choice, autonomy for all people, and not making assumptions about others and being more objective in our decision making. The next one is accessibility and universal design. So when we talk about universal design, we're talking about any use of products, services, environmental factors that are accessible to all people including assistive devices for people with disabilities. Reasonable accommodations goes beyond a parking stall or having an elevator. It's having appropriate modifications and adjustments to ensure that all people with disabilities have equitable employment and enjoyment in society and are based on human rights. The next one is diverse knowledge. It is making a priority to learn from people who are marginalized or otherwise excluded from professional conversations. In other words, when we enter a professional or educational setting, often we only hear the voices of a certain population or demographic of people, and diverse knowledge gives us the opportunity to learn from all voices and all perspectives of life. The next one is relational power. So relational power is how people experience repression, power, and privilege on a continuum, meaning that our privilege and our repression and our power fluctuates throughout time and throughout space, which we'll get to in a second. And this power is contingent on how we interact with other people and how we let go of our biases. So the next one is time and space, which is related to what we discussed before. So it's realizing the power of time and space, that each person involved in a fluid spectrum that should be honored and be reflective of social experiences and contextual factors. Contextual factors are things that a person endures or experiences that may present a barrier to success. For example, if someone has food insecurities, they may not be successful in the classroom because of that contextual factor. The next one is transformative rights. So this means we support human rights by the following actions: creating equitable social structures in all aspects of life, challenging narratives that support bias, evaluating relationships that begin with ourselves and then spread on to others, and then doing the work to be an ally, accomplice, and an advocate. And I'm going to define what those three mean for the sake of the conversation. So an ally is someone that supports a cause and they are active in defending the cause, but when they're not in that social group, they don't present to support or defend the group. Okay? An advocate is someone that has a strong belief about something, and so therefore they, in the circles which they are, they promote and discuss actions or items on behalf of a person. Being an accomplice is a balance between the two, because on one hand, you have a strong support for somebody else, but on the other hand, you're giving a person a space to be on their own platform and to communicate for themselves. So we have now talked about what we call intersectional practice, or the different ways that intersectionality intersects or comes together with humanity or with individuals in our communities. So the next part of the presentation will focus on looking through an intersectional lens. So often we go through our day with the same kind of people, with the same kind of experiences, with the same kind of thought, that it becomes so insular that we fail to see life through the points of view of other people. So before I show you these videos, I intentionally picked individuals whose voices are not often heard so that we can give them space today. They may have viewpoints which you do not agree with or that you feel might be triggering to you. So I wanted to provide that warning. I hope that as you enter the space, that you'll take some time to listen to the voices of these people and decide for yourself how in the future you can apply these practices and principles. So I'm going to go ahead and then Mindy, if you let me know if you can hear the sound. Okay.
My name is Carrie Gray. Carrie Gray is a Black disabled woman. And There's power behind that. In the United States, 1 in 4 in the Black community have some type of disability, whether that's visible or invisible. Historically speaking, organizations and institutions have shown us that they want to identify with one thing and build power around that, build influence and access. And I get it, right? So this idea that you have disability rights, you have women's rights, you have LGBTQ rights, and those kind of different pockets are really building a strong narrative. But the thing that I find to be harmful is when we're not building in coalition. Because the reality is that you have people like myself who are Black, disabled, and women, and so many other things. And when you live at the intersections of all 3 of those, then you can't split your political and social dynamics between these different groups. It doesn't produce real results of freedom, and it doesn't produce real results of access to employment and other opportunities that you're looking for. I'll give one example on this. So the Black Lives Matter movement. When it was created in conjunction mostly with a lot of young folks. What was unique about this particular movement was the intersectional philosophy that was built upon. The folks getting up and saying, we are not just fighting for one narrative, but we are specifically fighting for folks who are on the margins. We are fighting for Black folks who are also LGBTQ, who are women, who are femme, who are trans, who are disabled. They named it. They saw like their people across the country and said, I'm fighting for all of you. Not just some of you, not just the ones that have traditionally gained power and access. And that gives me a lot of hope because no one wants to be left behind.
I'd like to try something new. Those of you who are able, please stand up. Okay, so I'm gonna name some names. When you hear a name that you don't recognize, you can't tell me anything about them, I'd like you to take a seat and stay seated. The last person standing, we're gonna see what they know, okay? All right. Eric Garner. Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray. So those of you who are still standing, I'd like you to turn around and take a look. I'd say half to most of the people are still standing. So let's continue. Michelle Cusseau. Tanisha Anderson. Ara Russer. Megan Hockaday. So if we look around again, there are about 4 people still standing. And actually, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I just say that to encourage transparency, so you could be seated. So those of you who recognize the first group of names know that these were African Americans who've been killed by the police over the last 2.5 years. What you may not know is that the other list is also African Americans who have been killed within the last 2 years. Only one thing distinguishes the names that you know from the names that you don't know: gender. So let me first let you know that there's nothing at all distinct about this audience that explains the pattern of recognition that we've just.
Did you know that Sensodyne now has a clinical range of toothpaste where you can both whiten your teeth 2 shades and also get sensitivity protection? It's just properly formulated from a dentist's perspective. It's something that I've recommended to my patients.
There can be no freedom as long as there's one group that's oppressed, because it's only a matter of time before they come for you. Kimberly Crenshaw came up with the term intersectionality to describe Black women who were in court because they were being discriminated against for being both Black and women, but they were not able to get justice because that idea had not been explored before. Intersectional feminism looks at all forms of inequality, not just gender-based, but race, ethnicity, language barriers, everything. And it says that there can be no equality without equality in all forms. I am a first-generation Muslim American feminist who used to be undocumented and grew up poor. But even when I was undocumented, I had privilege. I was able-bodied, had a job. I lived in America. There is an Indigenous women's rights activist in Australia who said to white feminists, if you're here to save me, I'm not interested in working with you. But if you understand that your freedom is intricately connected to mine, then let's work together. I consider myself a Muslim feminist. My Islam says that you have to be an activist if you consider yourself Muslim. One of the most important tenets of Islam is that you have to speak up for any form of injustice. If you don't, that is considered a sin. And to me, any kind of inequality is a form of injustice. We must end all forms of oppression. I get it. When we feel scared, we want to be selfish and think about ourselves. There's fear for
I identify as a Hispanic American.
Afro-Latina.
Mexican-American.
Chicana.
Mexican.
Afro-Latino.
To my family, I am Puerto Rican. To the country, I am Latina.
Growing up, I felt as though I was too Black to be Latina and too Latina to be Black.
Chicana, I think, identifies more of the political and social values that I hold more than just where my family's from.
I don't feel pressure to be more Latino or American. I'm comfortable with who I am, like culturally.
How can I be Mexican when I'm pressured to be more American? How can I be American when I'm pressured to be more Mexican?
My family, growing up, wanted me to, stick with my Hispanic roots, but also did not want me to show those roots to the world.
A lot of the times people didn't even know that I was Cuban because I guess I don't look like your typical Cuban.
My mom is Mexican, so I've always grown up with her culture, with her language, while being American doesn't come up as easily.
I've gotten people assume, even other Latinos assume that I'm white or that I'm not Latina or Chicana. It definitely hurts, but at the same time, it's not something that I can control. I think I can do my best to project that identity.
It's hilarious when you walk into a room and they don't think you're Caucasian enough, you're not American enough, you're not Latino enough.
Being Latino isn't as accepted as it should be.
It makes me feel pressured to fit a certain mold here in the United States. But now that I'm older, it's more like, it's what I make of it.
That doesn't stop me from being proud of who I am and where I'm from.
And then ultimately, I think what you settle on is how you view yourself.
We're kind of stripped in a lot of cases of our Spanish tongue and our Spanish heritage and told it's really important that you only speak English.
Because if you're from a Spanish-speaking country and you can't speak Spanish, it's harder for you to connect with the people there.
And not being ashamed when you do speak Spanish, but also not being ashamed if you weren't taught it.
Okay, so Spanish is not my first language because my parents were afraid of me being discriminated against because they were discriminated against. And now they're hurting me because I'm not Latino enough because Spanish is not my first language. But they don't know that I couldn't speak Spanish because my parents were afraid of me getting hurt.
My parents have already done all the work for me. And that's why I feel like I have like a bright future ahead of me because The work's already been done. All I have to do is like harvest what has been put on the ground.
But it's about me and other Afro-Latinos working really hard and continuing to make strides.
I feel like this country has a lot of opportunity for me.
When you have pushed another human being towards the light, towards positivity, towards a voting booth, towards using their power, you are powerful.
People are telling us as Hispanics that we don't belong here. That's kind of motivated us to join together as a Hispanic community and say, we do belong here. And despite what you're saying, I will prove to you why I do belong here.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking.
Results from a recent Gallup poll indicate that the LGBT population is growing as more Americans self-identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Hello and welcome to Comcast Newsmakers. I'm Tatiana Anderson. While progress has been made in advancing LGBTQ equality, advocates continue to work towards increasing non-discrimination protections. And part of that push is Kiera Johnson, Executive Director of the National LGBTQ Task Force. And Kiera, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. I'm glad to be here.
So, look, there are states where you can legally marry, but still get fired for being part of the LGBTQ community. Explain that disconnect.
Yes, marriage was definitely a step forward, but we all know that the fight for true civil rights and liberation and freedom is a long road. And so you're right. The reality is that you can be married one day and then, evicted from your apartment the next day if you are in a same-sex relationship. You could be fired from your job. You can be kicked out of a store just for who you love. And so that's where our community is really picking up the fight and have a lot of urgency to make change.
So there clearly are still contradictions, but the fact of the matter is that Gallup poll from 2021 does show that the LGBT population is growing. So what does that herald in your mind when it comes to equity, recognition, equal rights?
Yes, it was such a surprising poll, and it was an exciting one because what we're seeing is that more people are coming out as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, and we know that being counted matters, and what this means is that there are more people who are going to be engaged in the fight and telling their stories and engaging their elected officials to create a better quality of life for themselves and their families.
We know that there's certainly a lot of talk these days about the ideas of equity, about equality. What's the distinction when it comes to those words for the LGBTQ community? How do they apply differently?
Yes, intersectionality is such a critical part of our understanding and our work. The reality is that I cannot be a woman one day, Black the next day, queer the next day, and a parent another. We all live our identities simultaneously. And so we have to come up with solutions that meet the needs of the whole person. And that is what, that is the challenge, but also a huge opportunity for our movement to take on.
I wanted to go back to that Gallup poll from 2021 because there are a lot of layered findings in there when it comes to identification, when it comes to healthcare. What are some of the things that stand out to you most about those findings, and what do they indicate about the changing norms of society?
Yes, I think sometimes people assume because they see more LGBTQ people on TV or that we've had a gay man run for president, that all of the work is done. And the reality is that we are seeing more LGBTQ young people coming out, more people entering the workforce. And so it is a requirement that while there are unique challenges that come with that we have to come up with unique solutions for meeting the needs of LGBTQ workers, LGBTQ parents, and folks who are just living their lives out in the world who need protections and civil rights protections, full civil rights protections, is what the task force and our movement at large are fighting for right now.
The task force is in the midst of a huge public education campaign. It's called All of Me All the Time. Kira, what's it about and what do you want to accomplish with it?
Yes, LGBTQ people are everywhere, right? We are in the immigrant rights struggle. We are in the reform of police fight. We are in the healthcare struggle. And All of Me All the Time is about how do we meet the needs of the whole person? How do we ensure that the quality of life of all people, given all of their identities, are met so that they can thrive and participate in our political system? And make decisions, right, that create a better quality of life for themselves and their families.
And Kira, if people want to find out more about the task force, what's the website?
Yes, you can visit us at thetaskforce.org. We can't wait to get you engaged in the fight for federal protections and look forward to seeing you soon.
Melissa, you are muted.
Is that better?
Yes, and I was just going to mention before you get started, there are a couple of comments in the chat just about how powerful the videos were.
Okay, let me powerful video, blown away. Okay. Thank you everyone for your comments. Okay, so as you watch those videos, there are 3 takeaways I would like you to focus on. So 1, what are some things that you didn't know before that you know now? 2, of the things that you learned, what is one thing that you would like to learn more about? And 3, of that one thing that you're going to learn about, what's one thing that you're going to act about? So have that as we go through the rest of the presentation today. So the next part we're going to discuss is creating change. Creating change is doing the work of increasing intersectionality at home, the community, workplace, and among those who are marginalized. To help us define how to create change, let us use the acronym CHANGE. The first one is collecting or creating data. So there's some things to ask ourselves as we are in a workplace or in an academic setting. Is the information that we're collecting in our business or in our academic setting reflective of all demographics? Are the materials provided in a variety of accessible formats? Is there a variety of voices planning and executing information that you are seeking? So those are some thoughts about creating data. So that's the seed, okay? The next one is having difficult conversations. Having a difficult conversation requires 1, doing the work to develop empathy and a plan for change. 2, active listening and being willing to accept the need to amend your actions. And 3, not minimizing the experience. That means that if someone expresses something to you, to say, oh, it's not that bad, it'll be okay. That is what we mean by minimizing the experience. The next one is a seat at the table. We have all heard the discussion of giving people a seat at the table, but what does this seat look like for you? Are you willing to speak out for those who are not being heard? Are you in a place of creating inclusivity when there is none to be found? Do you recognize that the seat looks different for each individual? A seat at the table. The next one is never stop learning. So often we have attended a seminar, an event, or a dreaded mandated work requirement course, and we feel like we have done our due diligence in learning about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I invite you to never stop learning about the experiences of others, and more importantly, to determine how you apply what you have learned, enhancing your life and that of others. In so doing, we can change humanity. The next one is groups. Each of us belongs to groups or communities. They could be religious, they could be social, they could be the connections you make in the workplace, our families, a special interest group, and the list goes on and on. So how do we increase intersectionalities in these areas? And what can we do to encompass cultural awareness? So we can accomplish increased intersectionality in these communities by looking around us and seeing those people who are not there and making an investment into understanding why they're not there and what you can do to make the space inclusive for them. 2, how can we encompass cultural awareness? So often we talk about cultural sensitivity or cultural competence, but cultural awareness is understanding people's point of view, their actions, and their belief systems that may be different from yours. Do you consider that when you engage in these groups? Something to think about. And the last one is engage. Engage is a reminder to speak out against injustice in all forms, and a reminder that fighting for human rights is not linear. A win for one is a win for all. So this is how we can create change. So once again, it's creating data, having difficult conversations, a seat at the table, never stop learning, groups, and engage. If you want in the chat, you can write down how you feel that you can create effective change wherever you are. So now that we've discussed our intersectional practice and the things that we can do for ourselves and our community, I would like to take a few minutes and discuss the things that we should avoid if we truly want to create an intersectional space for ourselves. Intersectional practice helps close the gap of injustice and equity when we take the time to stop, or STOP, and revise our thinking and our actions. So the first one is stereotypes. Each of us has our own biases, and as a result, we develop stereotypes about different cultures, communities, and individuals. The best way to work against this thinking is to learn more about others by participating in events and activities outside of our comfort zone. It also requires doing research about things we do not know. The next one is thinking inward. It is vital to improve our connection to humanity by avoiding thinking inward. Thinking inward is the inability to see others' perspectives as valid. Looking at life experience solely through one's own lens. Believing that contextual factors do not exist, and if a person tried hard enough, they can extinguish them easily. Thinking inward. The next one is opposition in thought. Just because two people have an opposing viewpoint does not mean one side is right and one side is wrong. The inability to embrace this ideal is called opposition in thought. And finally, our P is passive action. Passive action is appearing to be present or have empathy or concern, but the belief that somebody else will take the lead. In an emergency, it is often what is called a bystander effect, where people fail to help those in need because they feel someone else will help or take over. Passive action is a bystander effect of the heart, where a person's value is increased or diminished by the narratives of society. So once again, these are things that we should stop. Stereotypes, thinking inward, opposition in thought, and passive action. If we as a society continue to develop attributes that promote intersectionality, we can contribute to build bridges that not only allow us to thrive, but change the course of humanity by first changing ourselves. I am queer, I am Black, I am intersex. Yo soy Latina, I am a foreigner, and I am me. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I just want to burst out into applause. That was so eye-opening, and so great. And with that, let's open up our Q&A. I know you hit on a lot of really important topics and said some really profound things. And now I just want to open that up. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to share? Let's see. Let's look in the chat. I'm seeing some things.
Can you expand a bit more on the group's part of the change frame network? That's a good question. Let me go back to this so we can refer to it. Okay. So I've been asked to expand a bit more about the group's part of the changed framework. So in other words, each of us connects to those individuals who are most like us. Studies have shown that people will draw to those who look, think, or act like them. And so the call to action is as follows, is that as we are part of these groups, it's okay to have that insular experience, but at the same time, we should always be drawing in to other communities and other people and thinking to ourselves, how can I be more accessible? How provide more accessibility? How can I be more inclusive? How can I give a voice to those who are not being heard? And so that is the basis for having that section, for having the groups, because oftentimes we find ourselves in a space where we stay in our comfort zone and we don't go out of it. So this is an invitation to go out of the comfort zone. Okay, Krista says, practically speaking, how can we be as individuals be more inclusive? How might we go about discovering what we don't know? So I think some ways that we can be more inclusive as individuals is one, we can ask. So in other words, if someone asks if something's going to be accessible, you don't know the answer, you can ask them to define what that means, or you can do your own personal research. Okay. Two, inclusivity is not just inviting someone to a space, but making the space inviting to them. So if you're someplace and you see that there's some people not there, you might think, okay, is it presenting cultural sensitivity? I will give an example. I was asked to speak at an event about religious experience. And during the event, they provide a luncheon and they served ham and cheese, which is not culturally inclusive because most religions outside of Christianity do not eat ham or pork. So that's an example of thinking as inclusivity as more than just having a space for someone, but making space appropriate for them. And then the other part that Krista talks about is what we don't know, what we don't know. So what I can say that is this: there are many things in life that we don't know, we have not yet experienced, but does that not mean that we cannot hold space for somebody else and listen to their story and decide for ourselves how we will apply their story in our life and vice versa. One thing I will make a cautionary statement here. Please do not marginalized people as Google. So if you have a question about a term, a definition, or understanding of something, that is your job to do the research. Please do not rely on the one person you may know that fits into any of these categories to fill that for you. That is not the job or the responsibility. So I want to like to make that clear. Are there any other questions? I'm looking down here. I'm trying to scroll back up. This is not cooperating. Can you? No, I got it. Okay, so then someone else said, yes, listening definitely helps us discover what we don't realize we need to learn. So something about listening, which I didn't touch on for time, is that we should be active listeners. That means three things. One, that we are listening free of distraction. Two, we're listening from a place not to necessarily find a resolution, but to develop empathy for the other side. And three, that we are listening because we want to be able to amplify the person that is providing the information, not to amplify our own platform. Are there any other questions in the chat or people raising their hands? Mindy, I can't see if anyone's raising their hand because I can only see a few of you on the screen.
I will look. I haven't seen any. I don't see any hands. Does anybody else have questions? It could relate to your particular type of work that you do. Or any other questions for Melissa?
I added a question in the chat.
Okay, so Carl says, like, people assuming they know a culture, but they do not. Oh, so this is a very good point, so I will talk to this. So oftentimes, especially since I've lived in Utah, we have a thing which I call culture clumping, which looks like as follows. Okay, so someone speaks Spanish, for example. They all must be from the same culture. Or someone identifies as being a member of the LGBT community, so they must all have the same experience. Or we have people that are just newly to this country, so they all must have the same refugee experience. And so I call it culture clumping because rather than seeing each culture as unique and beautiful, we clump them together into one identity. So that's something that we should be aware of. Thank you, Carl, for bringing that up.
I just noticed Carl had, I didn't see your questions up above that, Carl. So thank you for pointing that out. He also said, can you talk a little about assumed cultural competency? You find this a lot in Mormon circles. Can you talk a little about assumed cultural competency? Oh yeah. So I guess that's basically what you said, but I don't know if you had anything else to add.
So the other thing is what I can't emphasize over and over again, that each of us has to do the work. Meaning that if we want to say that we're in a space of supporting intersectionality, we have to start within ourselves and identify what are our biases, what are our prejudices, and claim them, because we can't change what we cannot claim. And on a lot of religious and insular circles, there is a tendency to make assumptions about people based on the way they look, which then denotes a certain value or caste system. And I think what Carl is trying to refer to is the fact that by doing that, you're actually separating those people from the group they're trying to belong to. So the sense of belonging is then altered. So in other words, you're going to a space to belong, but only part of you can belong there. And that's where we have to correct, of course.
I think a great representation of this is Alex Boy songs. People assume that Alex Boy actually sings African songs, but if you have a person who's from Africa listen to any Alex Boy songs, they're very offended because Alex Boy songs were written at BYU by a white student before it came out. So the Africans note certain things in their stuff, so it's kind of understanding that. Sorry, Melissa. I just always like to use the Alex Boy example because everyone thinks in Mormon circles that he gives African songs, but his songs are actually not African. So,
another example I like to give is that sometimes when I go in public, people will come up to me and say, "Oh, I have a cousin that lives in Nigeria." Well, that's fantastic, but my family's not from Nigeria, and what does that association have to do with me? So that's another area to be careful of, is that to make assumptions because someone's presenting something a certain way doesn't mean it actually comes from that culture.
There was a moment in the
someone
chat.
else wrote another.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on, I'm having the chat bigger. Okay.
Go ahead.
Someone else wrote, I think this relates to a lack of cultural humility. So that's very beautiful. I agree with that. I think part of cultural humility is seeing all cultures as equal and valuable. Because so often we see that the cisgender, Eurocentric religious beliefs are those that are held in the highest, when really everyone's culture and everyone's religious expressions should be held in equal value and presented with equal sacredness. So that I think that's part of having humility to say, you know what, you don't think or act like me, but I can hold space for you and the space for you I have within me. Hold on, I'm sorry, the chat keeps disappearing here. Can you see the chat? Because this disappeared from my screen.
Yeah, I see it. I haven't seen any additional comments or questions, but anybody else have any other things they want to ask or share? All right. Well, please feel free, we have a few more minutes, so put it in the chat. I'm going to launch a survey for everyone. If you would please answer a few questions. We just want to know more about your experience with us today. So I'll go ahead and launch that. And I don't know if Melissa or Eduardo, you have any other things you wanted to share.
I just want to say thank you, Melissa. Thank you for opening this conversation. I think that, as you said, we need to be very good listeners and expand the conversation. It's not only once; it needs to continue because societies are dynamics and are always changing, and we need to keep updated in what is happening as well. And appreciate that you are taking your time and you are sharing your knowledge and your life experience with us. I hope that it is not the last time that you are coming to share with us. I hope that it's gonna be the first one of many that are coming. I don't know if you have a last word for us.
I just would like to thank Mindy and Eduardo for inviting me today to make this presentation and for giving a space of healing and hope and restoration for our future. And despite all of those individuals who are not supportive of these activities, that we continue and move forward so that we can empower generations to come. And thank you again.
Thank you.
As you're finishing the survey that I posted for everyone, I also wanted to bring your attention in the chat. I just posted a link to our website. We do have more upcoming events. Next month, we have a webinar and also another community of practice meeting coming up. They're going to be great. They're going to be on slightly different topics than ours was today, but still surrounding the intersection of disability and diversity. So please join us. And if you have any questions about those, feel free to reach out. If you don't already know, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it nowadays. And we're also on LinkedIn. So if you would like to follow us on any of those, and we also have a regular newsletter for our whole network. So if you haven't joined that, the link is also on our website to join there, so you can stay in touch with us and keep coming back and learning more with us. It's so fun to get together once a month and to learn from such talented and wise people. There's so many great things to learn, and today I learned so much. So thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you again. And I put my email in the chat for anyone would like to be emailed a copy of the presentation today.
Oh, and thank you for saying that. We'll also have this recording posted on our website. So if you want to refer back to it at any time, share with your friends, share with your coworkers. We would love that too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.